you have to get in the game with all of these like large language models, generative AI. So yeah, just brushing up on those things, learning about like this new machine learning architecture, which is transformers. So yeah, I mean, learning never stops. I mean, you have to do that. Yeah.
We are here to start our Beyond Code series. And this time we have Abhinav Vishwa joining us. And it's a pleasure to have you here, Abhinav. Just to give you everyone a bit of context about Abhinav. So Abhinav has started his career as a software engineer. He was working with companies like Uber, Polygon, Payor, and others. He's been a tech leader in this space, and we will definitely learn a lot from his experiences. And happy to understand what his leadership style has been, what his journey has been. We'll try to dig a bit deep into that. Uh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, Abhinav, yeah, a brief intro uh, 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 about you also from your side.
Yeah, thanks, Shivam. And yeah, happy to be here. Cool. So yeah, let me just start with my intro. I'll just start with what I'm doing right now and just try to go in like reverse chronological order, I guess. So
Yeah.
I'm currently, so yeah, my name is Abhinav Vishwa. Currently working on building something of my own. Um, Before that, I was part of Polygon. I was a director of engineering leading the core protocol org, so which includes the primary chain of Polygon, their Edge and SuperNet solution, which are the app chains specific, Avail, the data availability solution, some parts of infra and apps. Before that, I was part of Uber for close to 4 years. I was part of risk engineering and then later on Uber Eats. Before that, Direct Eye for 1 year. And before that, I started my career with a hedge fund called Delisha. And yeah, I graduated from Triple IT, Allahabad.
But in those days, I remember I had Triple IT Allahabad. Uh, yes, I'm from UP, so I definitely understand these are some of the top colleges that we had in the state, right? So yeah, nice to hear that. Um, so Abhinav, like just to understand, like how, like looking back at your journey, uh, what was that like? Did you had this passion for computers right as kid, or you built this along when you went to college? How did you get this knack for coding and building digital products and stuff?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, we had computer labs in my school, but then we had to share it with other kids, which I obviously did like. So I got my first computer. Yeah, my parents got me my first computer when I was in sixth or seventh grade, if I remember correctly. Spent like good 1 or 2 years just playing games on that before realizing that it can do a lot more. So I started to learn a little bit of basic and C programming, learned building flowcharts, object modeling. So yeah, I mean, these kind of things sort of laid the foundation of eventually picking up, the relevant stream, computer science, in college.
Got it.
My first love was still aerospace engineering, but yeah, kind of like settled on computer science. Yeah.
I think aeronautical engineering is there in certain colleges. I think IITs is there, right? Not
Yeah.
sure with
It's in like
some
very, very
branches,
limited colleges. Yes. Yeah.
very limited colleges. Nice. Probably you don't know, right, where life would take you. Probably sometime, right?
Sure.
So sometimes in the future, aeronautical is the thing in your career, right?
Hmm.
You have always taken some challenging head on, right? You never know. You might pivot to that as well,
Yeah. There's always the
right?
option to start a company in
Uh,
that area because it's like it's
yes,
all the rage right now.
and
Yeah.
and like space tech is heating up in India like anything right now.
Yeah.
You read the
Hmm.
reports, right? Yeah. So yeah, so just talk about a little bit in terms of we'll go back right from your kid. We understood that. Now let's go into the college, right? Obviously, these are some of the most aspirational colleges, right? If you're a kid in UP, you aspire to be in Triple IT. That time I think it was called something else, if I'm not wrong. When I was young, but how did the institution? What is this about the institution? Do you think? Because I've actually lived there for a, even though I was not from there, but I've actually lived for a couple
Hmm.
of days, but the vibe is very different, I can tell you. I've seen the hostels and the guys and the small canteen and stuff. Can you bit elaborate in terms of how does the institution act as a pillar in your growth, and what were some of the things that you remember right now?
Sure. So yeah, Triple IT Labad actually has a very strong culture of like just building things. So be it classroom projects, which are very output focused. They have a very strong focus on competitive programming, of course, and open source development. So most of my projects, which we built as part of like regular semester projects, they were very concrete. I mean, you was actually supposed to deliver something. It was not plain theory. So that sort of like build this foundation that the project is essentially not just about research. You also have to apply it and then build something which end users can actually play with. So I also participated in Google Summer of Code twice while in college, and my teachers and my seniors at the time actually encouraged me to do that. So yeah, obviously, like other than providing a pretty good chunk of money at that time in college, it gave me a pretty good idea of real world programming, like how things actually get done in big organizations. How do you use version control? How do you use continuous integration deployment? How do you use testing? How do you make sure that once you have built something, how do you document it so that your users, be it developers, I mean, users can also be developers, or the end users, they can actually use your product. So yeah, it's sort of like my college actually definitely built that foundation of going beyond just a programmer, and then like sort of built us into a software engineer of some sort.
Yeah, I think again, and I closely relate to this because let's say we were coming from tier two or a tier two kind of college. One thing that I differently found was I lived for a couple of days in the hostel in to a hat, but the vibe is different. And since you're building, everybody was building there. I could recognize, and they said, "Yeah, this guy internship lag raha hai. This guy is going for an
Hmm.
internship." So that entire vibe and that ecosystem actually uplifts you. And when we see that across, even in the new like boot camps that you're there, I think uh,
Hmm.
what was lagging in these tier two, tier three, because a lot of our audience right now, which is would be probably watching this or consuming this, is coming from tier two and tier three. So you can't actually, let's say, build an ecosystem around it, but become a part of such communities, right? Or some groups, like when you said GSOC and you have Google Developer Group and so on, and you have multiple communities, not just rebase, where you can actually go and at least become a part of the ecosystem. Because in some, when you go to tier one college, right, that is enabled by default because the kind of people that you are there with. But if you don't have that kind of a support system, don't just wait for that to come in. You build what was working, and I think glad to know that to behind that brand or behind that name, what is that intrinsic culture that you mentioned about, right? Which is everybody becomes outward focused, your teachers support you, and you need to be a part of some sort of a group, some sort of a community or something outside if your college does not
Yeah.
enable that for you. Awesome. Thanks. Okay. Okay. Let's say, so now moving out of college, right? We got some insight out of it, right? So now we also want to understand a bit in terms of your professional journey, right? Let's get back to time when you just joined in your first job, right? How were things then? If you can
Yeah.
share that experience with us.
Sure. I actually did my summer internship with the shop back in 2012, and yeah, I got a pre-placement offer from them. So yeah, I mean that's how I ended up joining the shop. So yeah, I worked in their middle office. So middle office, like I think very niche or specific. Most of the hedge funds actually just have like front office and back offices. So they had a middle office to build a data warehousing solution for trade and position reconciliation. So you have all of these trade and position coming in from the front office, and then they at the end of the day, they reconcile that with various third parties. But then they need a very robust architecture in between, which can actually ingest that data to start with. And the latency, I mean, the scale is huge. I mean, it's like very much comparable to like some of these ad exchanges. And then once you get that data, and then you have to put that in a presentable format. So yeah, building like a new DB database itself was like part of that experience. So yeah, I did that in DShaw. So later on they actually did a spin-off of their back office, created a new entity called RCCM. So I joined that as a founding engineer, and there I worked on building sort of a unified interface for their multi-tenant strategy. So they were moving beyond just serving DE Shaw as a client to serving others as well. So BlackRock, for example, like one of the prominent client that entity served.
I've had experiences of talking to developers and companies that have been in the HFT space as well, high frequency trading. Nights. And I understand like a microsecond or would probably lead
Yeah,
to major change in terms of fortunes, right? For people, like the entire industry sits on that, right?
for sure.
So obviously, like to dig deep in a different setup to understand how is the architecture for these apps. We'll love to have some sort of a conversation on that. Because in India, we look up to in startup space, you have Upstocks and you have Zerodha and you have others
Mhm.
uh, who have cracked it, but definitely just in terms of high level, like what it takes in terms of some sort of an architectural decision, like how do you build such systems with such low latency, right? Would be an interesting topic to cover with you, Abhinav. Definitely, we'll trouble you a lot after this as well. So, but yeah, but interesting to know that you've been in that space and got an opportunity directly to hit such systems. Okay, great. After that, like after your stint, like you went to Uber, right? And you spent quite a lot of time there, around 4 years. And probably, if I remember, those were the early days of Uber, if I'm not wrong, right? Being in India,
Yeah.
at least in the Indian market perspective. How
Mhm.
was it? How like we've heard all kind of things about Uber's culture, or both good and bad, like right? But just give us an insight of what went through.
Yeah, so as I said, Uber India was a very new entity when I joined. They had like less than 20 engineers, I guess. They were actually looking to expand their risk engineering charter from SF to India. So risk engineering essentially detect and prevents all the fraud happening within Uber's ecosystem. So yeah, a lot of fraud actually happens like in any marketplace, right? I mean, there are like three entities, so everyone would try to increase their incentives in some form. And as the orchestrator of this marketplace, you're supposed to make sure that everyone's incentives are aligned and no one is cheating the system. So yeah, I mean, they were planning to expand their risk engineering charter to India. So yeah, I pretty much joined as the first engineering hire in that charter. I ended up building the charter from scratch, worked with executives and India site lead at that time to hire the key folks. And then basically led this newly formed team to improve and build upon Uber's real-time risk engine. So it's called Mastermind. There is yeah, I mean, there are a lot of blog entries on that. So yeah, on Uber's technical blog. So and I also helped its rewrite later with you know, 3x, close to 3x TPS increase. Um, then yeah, I moved to Uber Eats later on as a staff engineer back in 2020 start. So just when the COVID started and the Uber's focus was actually shifting from rides to delivery. So I helped build like a couple of Eats expansion initiatives. So what those initiatives are is so whenever Uber Eats actually want to enter a new geography, um, so they need a different kind of order types rather than their usual that you place the order, restaurant receives it, courier delivers it. Yeah, I can get into the details of that. So I led a team of around like 10 engineers to build those products, which can actually help expand Uber Eats presence in new geographies.
Awesome. So somewhere that real time has been always there as a constant theme, right? In terms of be it trading or
Yeah,
creating
for
something
sure.
for Uber, right? And I was reading a book on this is called the cold start problem, Andrew Chair. Uh,
Yeah.
the first chapter talks about Uber's how they have huge dashboards
Mm.
where you look at real time what's happening, where it is happening, the kind of culture that it is. Amazing, like and I've read through that. I just wanted to experience also sometime those kind of
Yeah.
high velocity environments, right? Very
Yeah,
aggressive.
I've seen those dashboards where which was tracking like each and every user, and then you could see in real
Correct.
time like what exactly this person is doing, where exactly
Correct.
they're moving, And you could also predict that when they will place the order and whether there's a driver or courier around or not.
Awesome. We are just reading books right now about that, right? But yeah, somebody who has experienced that. Great, great. So much of knowledge, so much of experience would have actually been factored that you would have gained from that. So we got an insight that from a research team that you were able to, let's say, reduce costs, right? Support for Uber Eats, right? In terms of support costs. Give us an insight as an engineer, right? How do you, because a lot of times it happens that I don't know, I'm just coding, right? How does this impact the overall P&L or the revenue functions, right, of the company? Uh, what was the dictum all about, and how do you went about factoring in costs? Because a lot of times we're not obsessed with, and we think this is someone else's job to handle costs and everything. But like, how was your approach into this, and how do you went about uh,
Sure.
this aspect?
So yeah, I mean, this goes slightly into the weeds of how some of the orders of Uber Eats can, specifically in US and some of the other developed markets. So yeah, one of those order types is called over the top, right? So it essentially helps Uber Eats work with restaurant where they don't even have a direct partnership with them, right? So what usually happens is that so when you place an order, it goes to a courier rather than going to the restaurant. It goes to the courier. Courier is essentially a delivery person, right? So courier goes to the restaurant, places your order on your behalf, pays for it, waits for your order to get prepared, then picks up that order and then delivers to you. So in this entire process, restaurant is not aware that there's a delivery service even involved. So this helps in launching in new cities, for example. So when you're launching in a new city, I mean, if you try to go and like partner with all of the restaurants over there, that itself will take like months, right? So you can
Right.
start with this, show those restaurants the volume, the impact of Uber Eats, and basis that you actually partner with them. So this is sort of like acquisition strategy, partnership strategy. So, but you can see the inefficiency with this, right? So the courier has to wait at the restaurant for the duration the food is actually getting prepared, and then we also need to provide cards to these couriers so that they can actually pay on Uber's behalf, right? That in itself brings in like its own factor of risk because now you need to put efficient controls on those cards that it cannot be misused at the restaurant and even outside of the restaurant, right? I mean, you don't want these people to go and like just buy a Tesla on Uber provided cards.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So what we did was we decided to leverage Uber's customer support staff for this, right? So Uber already has like very extensive support, customer support, like across the geographies, right? So in the new model, how it worked was that when you place an order, rather than going to the courier, it went to a customer support person. And that customer support person actually called up this restaurant or actually went on their website. So in US, it's actually very common that people actually call up the restaurant and then place the order. And most of the restaurants actually have their own website as well. So they went to this restaurant's website or called them up, placed the order, paid for it, right? And then made this entry into the system that I have placed the order. And once after like some tentative ETA, the courier actually got dispatched. And now that courier's work is like simplified. I mean, they don't care, right? They will just, it's like any other Uber Eats order. They just need to go there, pick up the order, and then deliver. So we actually ended up increasing the supply of couriers as well, because those couriers who actually had the Uber provided card were like very limited, of course. So, and also at the same time, we reduced the inefficiency in the process as well, because courier don't have to wait, so they can actually serve more orders. So this actually ended up like reducing the support cost, and also actually ended up bringing in like more and more orders on Uber Eats system.
I think very importantly mentioned a point where you said the supply was increased, right? And whatever I've understood, when you're building marketplaces or kind of model on these kind of models, right? The supply needs to be solved first.
Yes.
Right, because people don't understand that demand is there, but the demand is just one thing that will come. You can solve for this later also, but unless you have the supply, the model won't work.
So and specifically like Uber Eats or any food delivery is a 3P marketplace, a 3-person marketplace, right? Yes. So there's like two types of supply. One is like actual like restaurant supply, and then there's the delivery supply.
Delivery guy,
so
delivery person.
Yeah. So this model, I mean, this change actually helped like both set of supplies. So this brought in like a lot of efficiency in the process. I mean, ended up building like, I mean, this, even though in principle it sounds very simple, but then yeah, I mean this is definitely a huge like design feat, because now you are connecting like two very independent systems, right? One is the order flow and second is the customer support, which are usually not connected like in any company. These are like two very independent
Very
things at the
different.
end. Yeah, so we had to connect these two, and then also at the same time, I mean, the product challenge was very interesting. To build. Yeah.
Completely out of the blue, no playbooks, right? You have to rewrite the playbooks to do this, right? You
Yeah,
never get a playbook to do this, right?
specifically for the customer support folks. I mean, that was like a huge undertaking, right? I mean, they had to, but then it definitely simplified the flow for couriers, because now we need not like issue the cards to all the couriers. Now what we did was we just started issuing like virtual cards to these customer support staff. So we don't even need to like issue the actual card to them. It will just show up on their customer support screen that whenever they place an order, a new virtual card will pop up. They will use that to pay for this order, and then that's it. That virtual card goes away. I mean, it's like one-time use, so
Just
all
get
the
just
fraud gets removed. Yeah,
just getting a bit curious. Were there any UX challenges when you guys were building this? In
yeah.
every experience,
So
and both from a delivery perspective and as a customer.
yeah, so specifically from the customer support systems, if we talk about, right? So surfacing this card information in a compliant way, because see, I mean, there like entire like regulations around how you can actually process the customer, how you can actually process the credit card information in your system. If you want to persist it in your system, that brings in like whole sets of like challenges. So there's a standard called PCCI or something, right?
Yes,
So you have to adhere to that.
security, security
Right.
compliances.
So all of that, yeah. So, but then, so yeah, we had to, like circumvent a lot of those, and then essentially surface this information in a way that which is compliant. So we just use like iframes, so that we are actually pulling in information from the credit card issuer directly rather than storing them with us. So we also need to
Yes.
make sure that it actually fits well within the UX of the system which these guys are using to actually place the order. So yeah, there were definitely some UX challenges.
So it's UX, it's product. I see it's legal. A combination of
Yeah.
multifaceted domains getting together and then engineering the right
Yep.
interface for customers. Right? Awesome. Uh, in Uber Eats, right? Like it's scaled pretty high, right? Even in India, right? In terms of volume, right? Your engineering team would have grown rapidly, right? That you're working, and you said that you were the first person to join that team, and obviously in Uber and work with them. How did you scale, right? Like, and what were the challenges that you guys faced when you were, let's say, hiring more engineers? Not in terms of technically, how did you scale? But we'd also like to understand when you were looking at engineers, because a lot of audience is developers want to also understand how you guys go about hiring and how do you ramp up uh, your teams, right? When you decide, once you get that fitment and then you want to scale, right? So, any insights on that side as well?
Yeah. So if you're talking about like specifically Uber Eats, so the
Right.
primary challenge was remote, to be honest. Right? I mean, the COVID had just started, and Uber's focus was also shifting from delivery. I had actually like very recently had moved to Eats from risk engineering, and then now like suddenly everyone was working from home. So yeah, I actually like never managed to meet a lot of people I worked with because I quit towards the end of 21. So those folks joined like straight out of college. They pretty much like worked there for like 1 year or so, and then either they quit or I quit. So yeah, there was like no in person. There was no chance for like any offsite or any in person meet just because of COVID. So yeah, learning was to definitely adapt remote as much as possible. Work async, ideally in a place that keeps like some sort of log so that you can reference it later. So yeah, this environment like sort of like created this mindset for me that I started keeping meeting notes for like everything. It doesn't matter like how trivial the meeting was, to document the conversation. Right? It was not a bookkeeping exercise, but rather a log for me to reference later on. Right. And then this definitely helped me later on in Polygon when my team was like truly remote, like pretty much like all across the board. And yeah, to answer your second question around hiring, yeah, I mean, at least like before that, even though we used to conduct interviews like for the US team, for India team, and whatnot, there was at least like one touch point where we could meet the candidate in office, right? So that suddenly went away. So all the remotes were virtual. Sorry, all the interviews were virtual, and yeah, I mean, you just had to make peace with the fact that this person you are not going to meet even during the interview, and most probably not even after that. Yeah, I mean, they are actually competent and they will be able to do the job. So yeah, it was more of a mindset shift than anything else. Yeah.
So the key is I have some really good insights coming in from the last answer, obviously, because this is what people don't agree, right? We have now not been talking about it also. So remote has its own challenges, but then you have to build systems to work effectively on remote. As you mentioned about that, you went about async, you started creating logs, and there's certain amount of changes that you need to make at your end, right? To make remote
Yeah.
function pretty well. And then you mentioned that when you use it and you build this as a habit, and you were able to replicate the
Mhm.
success at Polygon as well. It has helped you there as well, right? So these are subtle changes that you never will talk about, but I think with remote you need to build or rebuild your habits a bit to ensure that you are
Yeah.
able to be productive. Otherwise, it could be detrimental as well, right? Like in terms of if you don't do those finer customization, then that could be varying from like candidate to candidate or person to person, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, good. But that is something that people should think. Like remote is good, but what are the things that I change in my lifestyle or probably habits that will enable me to be productive? Awesome, awesome. And the other thing that you mentioned was about the mindset. Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot about the mindset. How do you shift your mindset from going to office to how do you adapt to virtual remote environments? Cool,
Yeah. At least
awesome.
like one good thing now compared to earlier when like remote became a necessity during COVID is now at least you can conduct offsites. So yeah, because I personally felt like, I mean, doesn't matter like all the benefits of remote. There's nothing which beats the the connection which you form with colleagues. So even like working with them, once in a month or once in a quarter, I think even for like a week, I think that brings in like definitely a lot of good ideas.
And then we value more these meetings also
Yeah,
because they are remote. So if you make it every day, then probably that you'll not give that much importance to those kind of meetings. But when you know
of
you're going
course.
to do this once in a quarter, you're pretty much you enjoy that even more. The essence
Mhm.
of meetings and the relationships comes out even much better. Yeah, it's similar feelings here. So yeah, the next one for you is okay. So if you have to ask you, like say, like in terms of what are the two or three things, right? As a team lead, right? That you should like you tell your mentors or sorry, you tell your people who are joining your team or juniors, right? Who join your team, right? To get in order or that could actually help them. If you just summarize that to two or three things, what is that in your top three? When you say, yeah, do these two or three things first, right? Someone who is probably joining your team, right? Any inputs on that front as well?
Yeah, I mean, definitely depends on the current
So that the
the team,
juniors
but then
whoever has
mhm.
joined you can deliver to his fullest. Any guidance you give
Yeah,
him
one
or
thing,
any yeah
one thing which I can just use the examples which I have, I
yeah
mean,
yeah
what I've done in the past. So, so what I usually do is that whoever is joining in my team, like regardless of their seniority, I usually ask them to like go through the documentation to ramp up, right? And if you find that something is missing, um, uh, try to build that documentation as you are learning about that system, right? That applies to not just code base, for example. So let's say if you're learning about something like a code base, and then if you see its documentation, it's readme lacking, go and work on that, like build that. But then it also applies like for people, processes, right? So yeah, I mean, when you are trying to figure out that how an org functions, like who does what, who is responsible for what. There's usually not a very good documentation for these things, right? I mean, that's why like identifying POCs is usually a little difficult in most of the companies. I mean, I haven't seen like a perfect solution anywhere, right? So it's good to enable these new joinees to essentially build those systems as and when they're learning, because their learnings are very, very fresh, and in many cases they're like very relevant. So some of the surprising results which I've seen have actually come from people who are like very recently joined. These people were actually able to identify gaps which we, like people who have been in their team were just got used to, and they started overlooking those things. So this just started building documentation as part of that. They identified that, oh, I mean, this particular workflow can be simplified by doing like just a simple thing. And then, yeah, everyone was surprised that, oh, I mean, we are just living with that so far, and then just like didn't think of it. Yeah.
Got it. Cool. So key insights from this one for me was like, so whenever you get into a company, don't expect it to be a perfect system. You said like, and you have worked with some of the biggest banks, right? So if when you're talking about it, like, so we can expect with other companies also, don't expect a perfect documentation to be there,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
Go into the
I mean,
system.
the problem with
Yeah.
the problem with documentation is that it needs to be maintained, right? It requires a
Maintained
lot
and
of
yes,
human input, and then whenever you introduce like any human input, you can obviously expect that it
some sort
won't.
of
There will be like some sort of a lag that as and when like new systems get built, they won't get. I mean, people won't go back and update the documentation.
So instead of looking that as a judging the organization on day one, look at it as an opportunity. That okay, now I have X thing. I know there's a delta Y, and I can contribute on that Y by exploring the
Yeah,
system and contributing to that Y and fill that X. So that X plus Y gives you a complete picture. Nice, nice. So rather than looking that from a mindset where okay, what is happening in this company? There's no documentation. And that's what a lot of people say. What to do? Right? Nothing is there. But look at that as an opportunity. You're building something. You have something. Whatever is there, just start filling on that. But yeah, nice mindset to go ahead with. And also, you mentioned that you should be able to identify gaps. That's a key skill that you will be able to build. Because when you get into the system, you have that external perspective. You're not biased. You're not into the system. You are the one who is actually coming up from and giving an external perspective on that product that is there, and leverage that to add value to the team, and that will obviously lead to better, more.
yeah.
I would say you having more say in the company. Uh,
Yeah, especially for engineers or people in joining like any technical role. What I usually recommend them, other than documentation, is that just get on like one of these support roles as soon as possible.
Right.
Like just try to monitor the on call of the team. Just see that what kind of issues are coming in. I mean, I have personally practiced this. It doesn't matter like at which role I'm joining any company. I try to at least like start shadowing the person who is currently supporting the team, like in an on-call capacity, and just learn that what kind of issues we are getting from the system, like from the users. That usually gives you a very good perspective of what kind of active maintenance this project requires.
Being connected with the customer, right?
Yeah,
So I think
yeah,
that's
for
the
sure.
golden mantra for be it for founders, be for good engineers, right? End of the day, we are serving a customer, and if you are connected with them, that's what you want to do. Like you have to be like all big companies are very much customer focused. So
For sure. Mhm.
so as a developer, if the more connected you are with the customer, the better you would able to deliver value to the overall audience. Nice. Nice. Thank you. Moving on. So Uber, then this hottest Indian startup, right? Polygon, making waves globally, raising funds. We know all from some of the biggest names in the industry, right? Polygon, how did this happen to you? And what were your responsibilities here? And you obviously joined as a director of engineering here. Uh, Brief story on that as well, Abhinav.
Sure. Yeah, Polygon is a sort of like interesting story, at least for me. So I had quit Uber around start of Q4 of 21 to build something of my own. So yeah, I was part of Ondex Founder Fellowship. I was ideating on a couple of broad themes around crypto data analytics, DAO tooling. Um, just going through that journey. So around that time, one of my friends from the show, who actually was an angel investor in Polygon, he recommended my name to the founders, and I got a call from JD, one of the founders from Polygon. So yeah, that's how Polygon happened. I joined there, and I was leading the core protocol org. So as I said, I mean, which is like everything non-PK, what Polygon does. So their primary chain, agents, subnets, avail, infra, dApps.
Engineers are listening. If you're doing good work, have a good network. People will refer you, right? And whatever
Yeah, network
stages,
is definitely like
network is
very important.
important.
Yes.
Stay connected with your guys. If you're working in great companies, obviously that carries forward. People you start with become angel investors in later stages of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, and the network grows as you grow. Uh,
Yeah.
so there is an importance of networks even in developers, because sometimes we feel in silos that I'm not good at networking. I just want to be alone or be isolated. Just concentrate on my code. That's fine, but relationships do matter. In your case as well, right? Gives your foot in the door, right? And otherwise, it's
For
very
sure.
hard for people, and people trust people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. What were some of the major responsibilities you mentioned? Like you were on the protocol side, you were working right with them. Any challenges that come to your mind and that are most memorable for you from your Polygon days?
Yeah. So when I joined Polygon, I mean, there was no engineering org per se, right? I mean, there were like a few engineers working under one engineering manager, and I mean, I sort of like built that structure in Polygon. So I mean, obviously, I mean, this derived from my experience in big tech. I brought those learnings to Polygon. So I hired the key leaders for. I first of all, like, I had to identify the teams that I mean, there's like a good chunk of work, and then there should be its own team rather than working in the shadow of like another team. So yeah, identified that structure, hired key leaders, and then enabled them to build their own team. Also hired very senior engineers from Ethereum foundations and other places who can actually hire those people as a staff engineer, so then they can work across team, provide technical guidance, then make sure that what the team is building is as per the industry standards, sort of. So again, I mean, if you think about like all of these are like big tech learnings, like what I've learned like in Uber, that you need these hierarchies of some sort, right? I mean, you need a parallel hierarchy for engineers, so that people shouldn't think that they have to move into management after a while. So they should have like some sort of path to grow as an IC, as an individual contributor. So yeah, some of these things which I did at the start, and then later on it was about primarily around execution, identifying the opportunities from the market, from the business, bringing in to the engineering, making sure that they are actually getting executed, and later on, like how do we market them so that they actually they get accepted by the community and the clients, of course.
You mentioned about ICs, right? And I was talking to, I cannot name the company here, but I was just talking to someone who's a major unicorn, largest player in the project management space. And I was talking to some of the folks there, some of my friends are working there, and they said that all of the managers which were pure, just some of the people who converted into management kind of roles, they're being asked right now in macro environment, you have to contribute, become an IC now. So I think it's good that if you don't get into those kind of, and if you, and the role growth is possible even in ICs, and when the tough times come, companies look for ICs rather than people managers, right?
Yeah,
Is what I see, right?
yeah,
And
that's true.
even as a manager, you have to contribute, right? So yeah, that's just, and it's good that if you keep your good habits with you, right? You just don't uh, go in the other path. Just keep that handy and,
Yeah,
and see how we can expand in the IC role, because that has been a
yeah. I mean,
major.
for sure. I mean. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a need of a parallel management role as well. I mean, I don't discount that, but the point is that in many companies, especially in like more traditional organizations, there was no path for engineers to grow other than moving into management. So
Correct.
Google, if I remember correctly, they came up with this parallel hierarchy where you could continue to grow, like go up to like Google Fellow or like senior Google Fellow, and then these profiles growing like all the way from staff engineer, principal engineer. That sort of like provided this framework to the industry that individual contributors also have a place in the growth of the company rather than just moving into management. So yeah, that's a practice which, even though it's like very commonplace in Fang Plus, it hasn't touched like all the parts of the industry. So people actually try to come up with like this in between title called tech lead or team lead, and then which is a mix of both, which I believe it doesn't really work very well. Yeah.
And it also, because a lot of our audience at US would be probably juniors. So, and at this point of time, we are contemplating in terms of doing an MBA and stuff, because we feel like we have been told traditionally, like, end of the day, it's going to become a management role. So that's not the
Yeah.
case now, right? You have companies
Right.
which you will never be, like, you're not needed. Like, you just concentrate,
Mhm.
play to your strengths, whatever your strength is. Could be management, then you go for management. That's fine. But if you feel that you don't enjoy doing that, and there are now roles available within hardcore engineering roles, even as you
Mhm.
grow, you will probably not go into the other path, right? So I think a lot of thing has changed because of startups now, which wasn't an option, let's say, 10 years back. But now you
Mhm.
have a lot of things available, so you can enjoy what you're doing without worrying a lot about doing something
Sure.
that you're not really enjoying or very good at. Nice, nice. Get that perspective. Uh, Okay, now, like in terms of just wanted to understand, right? So so there would have been a transition, right? Obviously, you have been working with on Web 2 or probably whatever, right? But Web 3 was a different ballgame, right? How did how was your experience? What was the learning shift, and how did you prepare yourself uh, to completely new paradigm shift? Was it a paradigm shift or not, or how was the learning curve also in this transition?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this transition was very interesting because I had to unlearn a lot of things for sure. Yeah, I mean, this P2P architecture is something which is not very commonplace. It's not something which, at least, yeah, we didn't learn about this in back in college. I mean, this was used to be a footnote when you are actually learning about system architecture back in college, right? Because it was obviously like not very common back then. Um, Other than that, I also learned about like how Web3 industry operates and how it's very different from like a big tech or like Web2 kind of industry. It was difficult in the sense that also had to hit the ground running, learn technical details while leading a big org. So yeah, while executing, I also had to take care of my own learning, make sure that the team is executing, make sure that I'm making sense while I'm talking to them in on technical details. So yeah, all in all, yeah, it was. I definitely learned a lot in that 1+ year. Yeah, I would have to say like managed to compress like I don't know like 2 to 3 years of learning in that time. Yeah.
So very nice takeaway, right? You said that I have to make sense to my team. So a person who has
Yeah.
been at the shop, Uber, Uber Eats, right, goes into Polygon, and then he has to work hard. He has to unlearn a lot of stuff. He has to revisit his entire thing, go back, study, come back and face the office so that he can demand that respect from his team. Not even demand, or from that sense, just be there and support them in that sense. So that's a key takeaway. That you should always be in that mode where you're learning, dedicate some amount of time to it, no matter what stage you are. So, irrespective of that fact, whatever lies we have, we have to always keep learning, unlearn, learn, and enjoy that, because the only way that you can earn respect or support your juniors or your team members is when you're able to give them some value beyond of what they know. Right? In your
Yeah.
case, it's like it's good to know that at every level this is needed. You can't be complacent that okay, I've been in the industry for 4, 5, 6 years. I know all of
Oh
this and I
yeah.
can, right. So
Yeah,
you have to
learning
be on the edge.
never stops.
It
Yeah.
should never
I mean,
stop.
see, I mean, whatever is happening right now in the industry, I mean, you have to get in the game with all of these like large language models, generative AI. I'm also brushing up on I mean, my minor back in college is like machine learning, but then yeah, I didn't work very closely on that other than Uber. So yeah, just brushing up on those things, learning about like this new machine learning architecture, which is transformers. So yeah, I mean, learning never stops. I mean, you have to do that. Yeah.
And also, don't
I
limit
mean,
yourself by a lot of people in our space, right? So, engineers would say we are a React developer, or probably you're limiting yourself just to a framework, right? So, just imagine you're just limiting the potential that you have to a framework which was built recently, right? Doesn't make any sense. So, when you talk with developers, because we are in a space where we hire a lot of folks, right? So people will not move from, let's say, from Java to Go, or from Java to Python, right? Or probably from as as rigid as from moving from Angular to React, right? So just
yeah,
be agile. Now, if you can move from, let's say, is an example where you are, let's say, doing HFT, and then you are probably high frequency trading, you're building systems in that, and then you are probably using in Uber Eats, and then you are now here in Web3, right? So technology should never be a barrier to learn something new, and don't limit yourself or make your identity that
yeah,
I'm a framework guy, or I'm a probably
for sure.
we are having much more potential than that, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to have your edge for sure. So I did this executive education program in Uber. So one of the Harvard professor mentioned there in one of the sessions that your learning should always be T-shaped, right? So you have to have your depth in one thing for sure, but then you need to learn. I mean, you have to have like enough breadth as well, right? I mean, you need to learn what's happening in the industry. You need to learn enough to be dangerous, right? I think that's very important. And then whenever you think that there is a paradigm shift coming, you can obviously change that. The T, right? I mean, you can always change your depth.
T
Uh,
shaped.
yeah, exactly.
It's called T shaped learning, yeah. And then you need to have range. So it's a combination of
Mm,
going deep at one thing that you know very well, and then you have a horizontal range where you can
yes.
play with, right?
Mhm.
Awesome. Now, this is something that people should keep in mind. Become a T-shaped. So we have heard of terms like T-shaped marketer, but we're essentially talking about becoming a T-shaped developer as well, right?
Mhm.
Nice. Okay. Uh, on the other side, right? In terms of just understanding a bit in terms of, would you like to share some of the significant projects I think we have discussed in terms of Polygon, or is there something that you want to share that we might have missed uh, from the Polygon
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah, I think I covered most of it. But yeah, just to put like some execution related things here. So yeah, I also so one of the things which was very interesting, which we did in Polygon last year was like this app chain thesis of Polygon. So the idea there is that the public networks are only going to scale up to a certain limit. So if you have a very specific use case for which you need your dedicated chain, then you should have an option to just deploy a chain specific for your use case. So gaming, for example, is one of the examples of that, where people require like people require a lot more TPS, which any public network can support at this point. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Polygon had this project called SuperNet. So we brought together the Edge team and SuperNet's team, enabled them to support like multiple like high profile enterprise clients. Nexon in Korea, and then Immutable X. So yeah, that was like one of the interesting things.
Got it. And in the gaming industry, I see a lot of India-based blockchain-based companies are also coming up, right? In terms of democratizing. As you're seeing a lot of during these IPL times, you would also find a lot of fantasy leagues coming on blockchain now.
Mhm.
Yeah, so interesting use cases as we go further deep. Okay, one more thing, like in terms of, let's say, moving out from a little bit in terms of getting in terms of general as a leader, right? Like, or when you're leading a team, how do you handle conflicts? Uh, and have you been able to generalize what type of conflicts they will become? And if yes, then
Mhm.
how do you handle them? Uh, and we are talking about team conflicts, not the other conflict.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, one thing which I've usually seen, like especially like within the team, that it's almost always possible to align incentives, right? So try to find a win-win solution. In most of the time, there is one, right? It's very rare that you won't be able to find. And then unless there is a malice in like somewhere, right? Keeping that aside, you will be able to figure out aligned incentive for everyone, right? Like some people try to bring in like how should I put it? They don't look at this win-win solution, and they try to they get very adamant about their opinion. I think if you have to go beyond that, then you have to have like some sort of relationship with that person, right? And that's where like some of these people management will actually play a lot of role. So it's not about your title, right? It's not about like whether you're an engineering manager or whoever you are, right? It's about how you can navigate the situation, how you can look beyond what people are actually saying, and then try to figure out that what exactly the business needs, right? What this particular situation demand. If you're building a product, at the end of the day, you are serving the end user, right? So try to figure out that what is the solution which will actually end up helping the end user the most, and that usually when you think about the problem and or the conflict in that term, the clear answer usually it surfaces that this is the win-win solution, which will also help the end user. So yeah, I think you just have to take like 10,000 feet overview and just not get into the details of what individual person is saying, right? So that usually helps.
All right. So when you get team conflicts, you have to look beyond code.
Yeah, you have to
There's a
look
lot of
beyond team
look beyond code.
mostly.
Yeah,
Yes,
beyond
yeah.
team and beyond code, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Right. And make it a win-win for both the entities. And that should be the approach. Nice. Finally, just this is the final one that I wanted to understand. So, if you have to give an advice to an aspiring developer, right, or an individual looking to advance, right? So, what will be that? And overall, uh, and someone will also like to understand a bit in terms of, let's say, want to transition to Web3 because you have done that, right? What are the two or three things that the person should do? So one is the first question is I'll break it down is on an overall, right? What are the two or three tips that you would like to give to some to aspiring engineers or people who are in the early stages of their career? And then we'll get to the other question. I'll get back again in terms of the Web3 part.
Sure.
But yeah, first thing is like on a generic level, what are the two or three things that you will like to tell? Let's say to
Yeah,
your
I
younger
guess
self.
I think we sort of covered it earlier, like around like
Yes.
building curiosity, right? I mean, build the curiosity about. I mean, that is something which is something I feel should come naturally to software engineer. That when you see something, how exactly this thing is working, right? Try to build like that level of curiosity. And second, I mean, there's something which has definitely helped me a lot, which is like risk taking capability. So, yeah, I mean, whenever I had the options, right, I had a fork in the road. I usually opted for like a riskier one if it looked exciting, right? So this actually helped me identify opportunities which I would have otherwise missed. So, for example, like transition from risk to eats in Uber. I mean, I was like growing very well in like risk engineering. I literally was the first engineer, but then yeah, I decided to take that risk, move to eats. So that helped my career for sure. Then Uber to Polygon, and now Polygon to my building like something of my own. So yeah, I mean, but then I understand that it's definitely a privilege that not anyone can take risk. So yeah, try to reach a position where you can take those risks. I have a very brief email conversation with Paul Graham on this. So Paul actually he published an essay a while back around risk taking ability, like how to build wealth essentially. And then I asked him this question that what advice would you give to someone who is not in a position where they can take risk? So he said that I am not entirely sure, given it varies quite a lot. But then he said that yeah, try to reach a position right where you can actually take those risks, and while you do that, spend a lot of time with people who are already doing what you really want to do. So if you want to be a founder, try to spend a lot of time with founders, and then that will also change your mindset. Yeah.
Got it. You become you're an average of four people that you spend time with, right?
For sure.
Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
spend time with the right kind of people. So yeah, great points here. curiosity, be bold, take risks, then spend time with the right kind of folks, get into the right kind of communities, talk to the right kind of people, get into the right kind of networks, spend time with the right kind of things that you aspire to become. Awesome. Uh, with Paul Graham, I have also read. I also follow his some of the blogs become actually your routine. So there's something called manager and maker time that he had written about.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, nice. Also, like just wanted to understand. So another question, like if I'm a developer, right? Probably let's say if I'm backend developer and I want to get into the Web3 space, right? What are the 2 or 3 things that you would suggest immediately? Because you've gone through that transition, right? How do I transition to a Web3 kind of a role? What will it take? Where do I get started with? Like 1 or 2 things
Yeah,
that I
a lot
can.
of people actually try to jump into the deep end. That is, they start to learn about like how blockchains work, like how to build a client, so that you can spin up your own blockchain. Yeah, I would suggest that it overwhelms a lot of people. So let's start with always start at the application layer, right? Try to interact with blockchain using RPCs, and then those tutorials are available in like multiple places. Once you have reached that point, then try to see that the modules you're interacting with, that is like smart contracts, how do they work, start writing smart contracts, and then go like one more layer deeper, like start thinking about the clients, how exactly the blockchains work, how do the clients operate, how to build one, then even further lower that, how exactly the networking layer works, something like that.
I think that's good because you
Yeah.
sometimes you just get so much involved and it overwhelms you in the airspace.
Yeah, because it's
Nice.
a very, very different architecture. I mean, if you just try to go to the deep end of things, I mean, it won't essentially align with what you have learned so far, right? So it will definitely confuse you a lot. So yeah, let's start with the basics, the familiar tech, which is like RPC. Just do a API call and then get the data and then see how things work, and then try to go like the layers below that.
Any specific tutorials or blog that you like or documents that person should go through? Any that come to your top of your mind?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have published like very good resources on this. So Nader Tabit from currently like Huawei, he is very active on YouTube. He keeps publishing tutorials. Other than that, there's a company called BuildSpace. They have recently pivoted to something, but then their tutorials are still available. So their tutorials are actually very good. So there's an Indian company called Questbook. So they also have like quests on their website you can follow to actually learn about Web3. So yeah, similar resources, for example. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, now we know that you're building something in stealth, and you're not going to go a lot into but we are excited to know a bit about it to the level you're confident to share and like in terms of comfortable. Sorry, not confident. Here, comfortable is the word. Would like to understand a bit in terms of what you're building and if, happy to
Sure.
listen your story.
So yeah, I'm building something at the intersection of cryptography and AI. So something which will sort of like which will give you better access to your private data in a cryptographically secure way. Yeah, that's the gist. Yeah, stay tuned. I'll probably share more details in the
Well,
coming weeks. Yeah.
obviously I have much deeper insights, but we will keep it for later when we go out in public. Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, Abhinav, and like this was a pleasure talking to you, taking out so much of your time. I know these are busy days right now for you. Being a founder, I can completely relate to the journey that you have now embarked upon. And yeah, it's amazing that what you're doing, the kind of journey that you've gone through, uh, and hopefully this would help folks who want to become and grow into better developers. That's the intent, to to help them become better at what they do, help them unlock their true potential. That's what Reway is built for. And hopefully we would have some stories that they would say, we watched this, we heard about this, and this inspired us to get into Web3 or become a better engineer or not do an MBA. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So,
Cool.
yeah, pleasure talking to you, Abhinav.
Yeah. Thanks, Shubham. It was great talking to you as well.
And thanks a lot for contributing to us. Thank you.